What if you woke up tomorrow, 1100 years ago, in a world with no medicine, no warmth, and no way out? Most of us wouldn't last a single week, but someone did. Someone lasted for years. The first thing you feel is the cold. It seeps through the cracks in the wooden walls, settles deep into your bones, and reminds you before you're even awake that comfort is something you will almost never know. Last night's fire is nearly gone, only dying embers glowing in the dark, and the smoke still hanging in the air burns your eyes and fills your lungs. You rise from a bed of straw and rough wool, in a single room where your family, your animals, and your survival all share the same breath. And somewhere in eastern England, beneath centuries of soil, archaeologists found her. A woman barely 30 years old, her spine bent from labor, her teeth worn smooth. She has no name. History erased it long ago. But her bones remember everything, and by the end of this story, you will understand exactly what it took for her to wake up one more morning in a world like this, and what finally stopped her. This is early medieval England, around the year 900. The history books are filled with kings and warriors and castles of stone. But most people never lived in castles. Most people were farmers. And before you could ever choose your own path, your life had already been decided for you. Because in this world, survival was not a choice. It was the only thing that mattered. Long before you held your first tool or planted your first seed, your future was already written. In early medieval England, birth decided almost everything. There was no new path to choose, no distant city to escape to, no chance to become something other than what your parents had been. If you were born into a farming family, you inherited their land, their duties, and their struggles, and you would pass the very same burden to your own children. Your village was not simply where you lived, it was your entire world. Above you stood the Lord, who owned the land and offered protection. Beside him stood the church, which shaped what you believed and how you understood your suffering. And beneath them both stood you, the farmer, carrying the weight of everyone on your back. You grew the food, you raised the animals, you repaired the homes, and your body was the only machine that made any of it possible. There were no engines, no gears, nothing but wooden plows, iron blades, and human strength pushed past its limits. We know the price of that life because their bodies still tell us. At West Stowe, a reconstructed Anglo-Saxon village in eastern England, and at burial sites across the country, archaeologists have studied these skeletons and found the same story written again and again. Worn joints, compressed spines, healed fractures, the marks of stress that began not in adulthood, but in childhood, at 7 or 8 years old. Because here, there was no childhood the way we know it. A child worked almost as soon as they could walk. Your body was your only wealth, and the world would spend it completely. In this world, food was never about pleasure. Every meal carried the same silent question: would there be enough to last until the next harvest? Your first bread of the day was dark and heavy, made from barley or rye, rough enough to scrape your throat, and sometimes sour. You didn't eat it to enjoy it. You ate it because tomorrow demanded strength. Meat existed, but it was a luxury you rarely tasted. Your livestock were far too valuable to kill, because they gave you milk, wool, and the next generation of animals. And the deer in the forest, they belonged to the nobles. To hunt them meant risking brutal punishment, so the wild abundance around you was a door forever locked. Everything you had depended on one fragile event, repeated every single year: the harvest. A single failed season meant hunger. 2 failed seasons in a row could erase an entire family, an entire village, from the earth. And even when the food was there, another danger waited in plain sight. You drank water every day to stay alive, but the same stream that kept you alive was also used for your animals, your washing, and your waste. To your eyes, it looked perfectly clear. You had no idea that sickness could live in something so clean. There were no microscopes, no understanding of bacteria, no name for the thing that was killing your children. The enemy was invisible, and it lived in the one thing you couldn't live without. Remember the woman in the grave, her teeth worn smooth? That wasn't age. It was grit, tiny fragments of stone worn from the querns that ground her grain, chewed into every loaf, wearing her teeth down year after year. She survived all of it. The hunger, the water, the endless gamble. But the deadliest thing in her world wasn't the cold or the water. It was waiting inside her own home. Your home was supposed to protect you. In truth, It was slowly killing you. It was a single room built from a timber frame, walls of woven branches packed with mud and straw, and a roof of thatch. And inside it, your entire life unfolded at once. You cooked, you slept, you worked, and you survived, all in the same smoky space. There was no chimney. The fire at the center of the room was your only defense against a winter that could kill, so you kept it burning, and the smoke had nowhere to go but up through the roof and slowly through your lungs. Archaeologists who study these people find the damage written in their remains, the marks of lungs blackened and scarred by a lifetime of breathing that air. And in the coldest months, you brought the animals inside, because their warmth could mean the difference between life and death. But with them came the fleas, the lice, the damp, and the filth of shared breath in a closed room. Yet the most terrifying threat of all was hidden inside the bread itself. In wet seasons, the rye stored in the dark could grow a fungus called ergot, invisible, woven into the very grain that kept you alive. Eat enough of it, and it brought burning pain, convulsions, hallucinations, and in the worst cases, fingers and toes turning black and dying while you still lived. But nobody in that village knew about fungus. To them, a person seized by visions and agony was cursed, possessed by demons, or being punished by God himself. That was the cruel arithmetic of this world. The fire that warmed you scarred your lungs. The grain that fed you could poison your blood. The roof that sheltered you bred the things that made you sick. Survival itself had a price, paid slowly, every single day. And yet none of these was what history feared most. Because sometimes, the danger arrived by sea. For all the quiet dangers hidden in the food and the water and the smoke, the fastest death could still come from the horizon. When your Lord called, you left your fields and your family and became a soldier overnight. No training, no choice, just a farmer holding a spear. And worse than any army were the ships. A sail on the horizon could mean raiders, and a village built and rebuilt across generations could vanish in a single night of fire and blood. In a world this fragile, people reached for the only thing that never abandoned them, their faith. The church gave suffering a meaning, turned famine and plague into part of a greater plan, and offered comfort when nothing else could. It also kept them obedient, bound to their place. But in the darkest winters, belief and the hands of your neighbors were sometimes the only things that carried you through. And the woman in the grave? Her bones tell us she survived the cold, the hunger, the smoke, and the endless labor for nearly 30 years. She was buried with care, laid beside others who knew her. She did not die conquered. She died having outlasted almost everything her world could throw at her. History remembers kings for the castles they built and the lands they took. It should remember her for something far harder. She simply refused to disappear. These forgotten farmers, whose names the earth swallowed long ago, were the foundation that everything after them was built upon. Because in the end, history is not only about how people lived. It is about why they endured. If you want to walk through more forgotten worlds and meet the people history left behind, stay with us. Their story is only just beginning.